התעשייה.
I don't know what kind of world this really is.
What do you think? Prime Minister Mayer, President Nixon has said that this is the best chance for true peace in the Middle East in at least 20 years. Do you believe that out of this latest war,
it should have been in 56, it should have been in 67, it should have been in 69. I mean, if it was necessary to fight a war and for our Arab neighbors to lose in order to bring about peace, they had these opportunities. I hope that this will happen this time, but it depends entirely upon them whether they really think that peace is more important than fighting a war. I'm not even saying winning a war, because that they have never experienced, thank God. But it seems that it's more important for them to fight a war, even if they lose it, than to make some step towards peace. With all my heart, I hope that this time it will be different.
now although we do not hear it, we are all being introduced, and there's a remark about Face the Nation coming from Herzliya this time instead of from Washington, and all that. And we have now a rest period of almost 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yes. Oh. Well, the commercial time will be rolled in so that everything...
You think I can light a cigarette?
No. No. That much time you don't have.
That's cruel.
That's... Mrs. Mayer, what President Nixon said was that there was the best chance for peace. He made no statement that there would be a real peace, but that there was the best chance for peace. Do you estimate that, from what you learned, that there is this chance for peace among the Arabs as well as among the Israelis?
Look, what I read, the only thing that I can honestly say is that we hope so. Because so far, from the Syrians and the Egyptians, there was not one single word said that one can say, well, look, this is something new. But I hope so. We can never make up our minds that there's no hope for peace. And certainly we shall do everything within our power to make it possible.
Mrs. Mayer, when this whole prospect of negotiations is thought of to come in the near future, can you tell us when and where and under what auspices Israel would like to see these talks begin?
As far as when and where is considered, as far as we're concerned, every hour is the good hour to begin. Every place in the world is the good place to meet.
And under what auspices?
Under what auspices? We'll listen and we'll make up our minds. And I don't think there'll be any trouble as far as that's concerned either.
Mrs. Mayer, before the war, Israel seemed to be moving towards greater independence from the United States in terms of arms and was moving towards self-sufficiency. In view of what's happened now, do you think this is a realistic goal in the next few years?
I don't think this is exactly true. It's true that we have been becoming more and more self-sufficient in arms, but it wouldn't be true we say that we were self-sufficient. And we got a lot of help from the United States in allowing us to buy arms from the United States even before. But now I think we will have to do two things. We will have to produce more on our own, and probably ask our friends to sell us more even in the future, as long as there isn't a realistic hope for peace. Because I don't know whether it was necessary for additional proof to the world what our situation is. Supposing that we did not have the arms that we had, supposing that our men were not as they are, what would have happened to us?
As you possibly move into negotiations, are you concerned about this great dependency on the United States?
Maybe it's semantics, but instead of calling it dependency, I would like to see it rather in a relationship of friendship between, two equals, the United States and Israel, as far as size is concerned and so on. But seriously speaking, I would like to see it as a matter of friendship and the understanding of the largest power in the world, that a small nation, no matter how small, should not be at the mercy of anybody that wants to bully it.
Mrs. Mayor,
I think it's as important for the United States as it is for Israel. It certainly is as important for the world. If Israel can be bullied by others and everybody else standing aside, that's happened in history before. Czechoslovakia was offered.
But you had a speech to the Knesset in which you outlined three dangerous things. You said that a ceasefire arranged by the superpowers, and I believe you said mainly in their own interests, is a dangerous thing. A world in which Israel has lost most of its former enthusiastic friends is a dangerous thing. And you were referring to other nations not the United States, but to other nations. And then, of course, enemies who possess most of the world's oil is a dangerous thing. Now, those first two dangerous things, I think, are the ones we're interested in. One in which you have lost the support of many small nations who were friends of yours before, and one in which you talk about a ceasefire arranged not by you, but by superpowers for their interests.
Look, I don't equate the two superpowers. It does not mean that we do not, from time to time, have differences of opinion, sometimes rather painful ones, with the United States. I don't want to paint this as an idyllic picture. The United States has its interests, we have ours. I think most phases of interest, as far as peace is concerned and so on, we are at one, but these are two different nations. So I wouldn't want to equate the Soviet Union, for instance, with the United States. That would be absolutely unfair and I think not truthful. But it's true, it would be much better if the Egyptians, and we had arranged it, but as long as the Egyptians don't want to do a thing of that kind, there's no...
But now you are talking. You've had a meeting of military officers between Egypt and Israel. Is that a breakthrough? Is that a start of something real?
This is the first time that something like this has taken place. We suggested it. We were very happy it was accepted. From what I heard this morning, and I haven't yet a full report, the atmosphere at any rate was good. There are possibilities, and I think realistic possibilities for future meetings. Now, if you want me to say, does this mean that it leads directly to peace quickly? I can't say that, but it's a good start. I hope so.
It is a good start.
It's a start that people begin to talk.
Has it, Mrs. Mayer, been followed by any assurance to you from Dr. Kissinger or any other source that, in fact, the political leaders in the Arab world, President Sadat and the Egyptian leaders, are willing to come and sit down and talk with Israel the way this military officer did yesterday?
No. I think what has been said is that the United States and Russia together now are committed, according to the third article of the Security Council resolution, that there will be negotiations between the parties.
But that's all you have, that piece of paper.
This time, between the parties.
Not a promise.
Well, I don't think they can promise, but that both of them are committed to try to influence the two parties to get together, that yes.
Mrs. Mayer, you now hold a large number, perhaps 5,000 Arab prisoners of war, and they hold in turn a number of Israeli prisoners of war. What moves have you made so far to attempt an exchange?
Well, the situation is such that we haven't even received a list of the prisoners of war. Against all international conventions, we have thousands of prisoners of war, and we are giving them lists through the Red Cross constantly. We are treating the wounded. The Red Cross can visit the Egyptian or Syrian wounded soldiers, and they do. We did not receive a list of our prisoners of war to this day. The Red Cross was not allowed until this minute to visit our wounded men either in Syria or in Egypt, and certainly they have not released the wounded people as it is they're supposed to do according to the Geneva Convention. We have done all this. We are sending a batch of, I think, 700 wounded prisoners. We're releasing them today. The Red Cross, about 2,000 wounded prisoners. We're prepared to release them, but they must also perform their part of the convention.
Will you move into negotiations with the Egyptians if this question isn't settled ahead of time? I'm now talking about peace negotiations.
Look, we don't want to put up conditions of peace, whether there are peace negotiations or not. International law, international conventions have not been made only for Israel. Both sides must comply. Of course we want peace, but supposing there is no peace, and supposing Sadat does not want to negotiate for peace, well, what about the International Convention, which says exactly what should be done with the wounded soldiers and Red Cross's
is this a political
the position
question?
of Red Cross? This has nothing to do with negotiations.
Is this a political, diplomatic question, or is this something which might be suitable for discussion by the military officers who have been meeting, or are they confining themselves strictly to the local issue of the Egyptian Third Army?
This question was raised by our representative. It will be raised in every forum.
At the military meeting?
At any meeting. We cannot just give up our men to the mercy of Sadat or Assad.
Mrs. Mayer, the way you talk, it appears that you don't consider peace negotiations an urgent question. How long can Israel continue to win wars at this price?
Really, I know that one must not judge the attitude of the one that asks a question, so I don't think that that's really what you mean. It isn't a question that we are not anxious for peace negotiations, but we have lived with this for 25 years and before. So we say, yes, by all means, any day, any hour, anywhere, we are prepared to immediately go into peace negotiation, under auspices or under no auspices. But it doesn't mean that I can forget that there are men who are now in the hands of the Syrians and Egyptians. From past experience, we know exactly how these men are treated, some of them wounded, maybe some of them seriously wounded, and the other side does not live up to the Geneva Convention.
Mrs. Mayer,
this has nothing to do with peace negotiations. No, and this does not mean that I don't want peace negotiations.
Mrs. Mayer, we've talked so far about Egypt and the possibility of negotiations with them, and at least you have an initial contact. What about the other front? What about Syria? This has always been a more difficult nut to crack from Israel's point of view. Is there any prospect of negotiations with Syria?
I don't know. I don't even know whether... I don't imagine that negotiations, if they start and when they start, and I hope they do as quickly as possible, that they will be with both parties together. As far as we're concerned, it's all right. We can meet in the morning with Egypt and in the afternoon with Syria, or vice versa. But I suppose it will be handled with one party at a time. I think it was more is said about Egypt because it is accepted in the world, I don't know why, that the Egyptians are more forthcoming.
Have the Russians undertaken to pressure Syria as they say they have Egypt into negotiating?
I don't know whether they have undertaken to pressure anybody.
Persuade, if you prefer.
I think mainly Egypt. But really, I don't know, maybe they also Syria. But Syria has always taken a tougher stand at any rate. This is the first time that they agreed to a Security Council resolution where the 242 is mentioned and where negotiation between the parties is mentioned. They've agreed to it. I hope they'll live up to it.
In fact, there's something of a buildup on the Syrian front. In the last several days, there have been additional Soviet tanks inserted into the lines. I think the Jordanian units there have been built up. Do you think that there's a threat there of a renewal of fighting?
I don't think so, but we had no illusions. There was no doubt in my mind nor in the mind of anybody that the Soviets have given up. They prepared, I think they prepared this war in the same way as they prepared the 67 war. Otherwise, how could you have an airlift and material arriving by boats practically in a few hours after the war started? So good even the Soviets are not. They can't fly boats. But everything began coming in massive quantities, and they've done it before. They're doing it now. There's no doubt in my mind.
Can you give me just one word? I'm going back to a little bit of old history. 2 weeks old, I guess, in Israel is not very old. But what happened at the beginning? Did Israel know there was going to be attack and take the calculated judgment that for political, diplomatic reasons it would sustain the first attack?
Yes.
Mrs. Mayer, what was the basic reason for that decision? Was it the fear of losing American arms aid?
It wasn't only American arms aid. Of course, we wanted this time. It was a calculated risk.
Did you guess wrongly as to how badly it would hurt you?
I don't know. I don't know how much less we would have been hurt otherwise. But it was a calculated risk to the extent that we did not want to create a situation where we will talk ourselves blue in the face saying that we did not start the war, we did not cause the war, and friends who are not so friendly and even our best friends will say, yes, if you only had not done that, we could have helped you more.
Would you take that risk again?
It depends upon. As I'm speaking now for myself, if this is taken into consideration in all the arrangements that have to be made, we'll say, well, we paid for it, we suffered for it, but in the end, it balances well. But if we are treated as though we started the war, and as though we are responsible, then I don't know what will.
How can you explain this lack of sympathy in the world for a country that was attacked?
I don't think this is a sentimental world. But even when countries and governments deal, so to say, realistically and only on the basis of expediency, they don't understand, I think, and that's maybe an audacity on my part to say it, they don't understand how wrong they are. After all, we don't have to go back to ancient history. All this happened only about 30 years ago, when people thought a big power, was bigger than it is to now, United Kingdom, and a gentleman who I'm sure wanted peace in the world, Mr. Chamberlain, said, well, look, this is what we have to weigh. Either we support Czechoslovakia or we have war. They gave up Czechoslovakia to Hitler and there was war.
Mrs. Mayer, let's go back to another bit of history. The question of Palestinian refugees has always been basic to the Middle East conflict. If you get into negotiations with any of the Arab countries, what, if anything, are you prepared to offer to settle this question?